Okay, we're back in session. We'll now go to Committee of the Whole. We have 5 items. The first item is Communications Update. It's all yours, Vanessa. Mayor, Vanessa, whoever.
Thank you, Council. I'm Vanessa Blackburn, Communications Director for the City of Bellingham. And I've been in this role as Communications Director for just about a year, so I thought it was time to give you an update on what's been going on in the last year for communications and what are some of the things that we have coming up in the next year or so. So this has been a busy year with some new initiatives. One of the things that happened last fall, which several of you were involved with, was a communications audit. And really this was an opportunity both for me to kind of get some ideas, some high-level ideas of what's happening with the city communications to get oriented. But it really was a high-level overview of citywide communications to try to identify strengths as well as areas that we could use for improvement. And with communications, there's always room for improvement. So that was a good assessment. Part of the assessment was to do an employee survey with several questions about how we're performing and to get some feedback from our employees, as well as doing interviews with city council members and department heads and key city staff who were involved in communications. Out of that, those results were then distributed to the department head team along with some recommendations that were more specific to departments as to what they can maybe be doing to improve, as well as some kudos for areas where they've been doing well. Some of the results that came from that audit was there was kind of an overall theme throughout that the city could do a better job of telling its story. That we do pretty well about news of events or things, breaking news, that kind of thing. We put out a lot of press releases, but we could be doing better about telling the everyday story that the city does through all of its multiple departments and scopes of work. There was also an identified need to do more communications training for employees, as well as additional support and training for the website. And then not just more stories in general, but on multiple more platforms. So as well, traditional media as well as social media, utilizing BTV10 a little bit more, and any other avenue that we have to be able to get our story out. We needed more clear guidelines on social media, as well as more updated communications policies, updated as well as new communications policies in some areas. So out of that, a lot of the work that I'll talk about today came out of the results from that audit. The first one is the social media policy. We really needed some guidelines as to how to create social media and manage it on a citywide basis. And so the policy that we ended up adopting earlier this year was largely based on Seattle's policy, as well as policies in other cities across the nation. And it really is aimed at the creation, maintenance, and use of social media, such as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as social media that maybe we haven't even thought of yet that may come in years ahead. The website refresh, which I know Marty Mulholland briefed you on, I think at your last council meeting, is moving forward. That's a major communications tool for the city. Our website, as you know, has hundreds of thousands of visitors, and making sure that it was more visual was a major component of this refresh, as well as better functionality on multiple platforms. We have increased usage on iPhones and smartphones and tablets, and we need to be better responsive so it looks better on that and it's a better usable experience for our clients and for the public. Also this year, we have a new communications intern in the mayor's office, which I'm very excited about. It's a 6-month internship. The first one started in January. It went from January to June. And then we have a new intern that started in July, and that will go until December. We've so far been working from Western students at the Public Relations Department in the Journalism Department up at Western, which has been really great. The students have been really providing a lot of support for various different departments, not just for the mayor's office or larger city communications, but they've been working with Public Works, the Parks Department, and the Planning Department on a variety of different issues and projects, as well as providing a lot of support for the website refresh, rewriting some content where needed, and also organizing our vast catalog of photographs, which is quite a monumental feat. It's been really great to work with Western and to have a student in the office as well. And then, as you know, we have the ongoing work that communications has throughout the year, press release support, working with social media and the website, as well as working with our community partners on a variety of different initiatives, working with the port and the county and other government agencies, colleges and schools and social services, as well as providing consulting support for citywide projects. I really see myself as being a consultant for the other departments when they have public relations campaigns or education. Thank you, Michael. So with the upcoming year, one of the exciting things that we have launching, and it should be coming out here in the next several weeks by the end of September, I hope at the latest, is a new newsletter. And this is really speaking to the need to tell our story better that came out of the audit. The goal with this is to have a 4-page newsletter that will come out twice a year. Right now we're looking at fall and spring. If it's super successful, then we may do it more often. And this will be published, it'll be printed, so it'll be a 4-page printed kind of document, and that will be inserted in the Bellingham Herald, the Cascadia Weekly, the Bellingham Business Journal, and then really this is for anybody, for you all, for the mayor to be able to take to public meetings. We're not going to be able to get everything into 4 pages that we're doing, but we're hoping to get a lot of kind of snippets of information about all kinds of different things that the city is doing. So that's, and then we'll also post that as a PDF on the website and make it so people could email that around as well. We're continuing to identify policies for revisions after the social media policy, which really needed to be done. The next one, currently we have a citizens inquiries and complaints policy that hasn't been revised since 1979, I believe. And a lot of things have changed since then, so that really needs to be looked at. I'd say that's my highest priority, to revise that policy. But then also we need to consider some possible other policies, communicating with the public involvement, how to work with the news media, and how to produce publications. As are some potential policies to develop. I'm also very open for feedback from you all as to maybe some guidance that we could use for communications. So I'll be looking for some of that as we move forward with more policy development. Another thing that came out of the assessment was the need to have more training internally. So we have a press release class that's going to be starting this September. It's already full, so I'm going to need to put some more probably out there for employees. And really, this is how to write for a press release and how to write for the general public. It seems like there's a lot of desire to have some more training on that, and that's a class that I'll be offering. But I'm hoping to bring in other folks too who have expertise in certain areas to be offering training for employees. Future classes may be how to write web content, how to work for the media, how to give great presentations, effective use of social media, and how to create content for BTV10. And then anything else that people may want to get training on. We also have a metrics conversation happening this fall, and thanks to council members Lilliquist and Borneman for your volunteering on that. And really, this is going to be a high-level analysis of our metrics and how we're doing at providing information for the public, and so that we can make good decisions and that we're measuring the right things with city government. And with the website refresh, another thing that will be coming out of that is a new press release system. One of the there's some improvements that we can make on how we distribute press releases. For example, we're unable to attach any type of photos or video with press releases, and when they're posted to social media, they also don't include any visuals. With the new website refresh, we should be getting more of that that we can be pushing out and offering to the public. The goals really for me are to increase our outreach to the public and effectiveness of communications using a variety of platforms, producing tools for employees, and increasing communication skills citywide. Those are some of my main focuses for this next year. So that's it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to talk with you now or
Dan, and
later.
then Michael.
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to go back to item number 1 under the upcoming year, the newsletter. What's the cost estimate on providing for that?
So for 2 issues, we're estimating it'll be about $13,000 for graphic design, printing, and distribution in the newspapers.
Go ahead.
And,
This is in the mayor's budget, yes.
okay. And then will local designers and printers be prioritized over non-local?
Yeah, we're using a local graphic designer, Credo Graphics, who actually did the same for the water report that you all put out. He did that, as well as he does the newsletters for the school district and the port. So newsletters are kind of his thing, and he's local.
Thank you.
Michael.
Thanks. I got a couple things. One, on the return of the newsletter. That really was a disappointment. I know the city's tried on and off to have newsletters, and postage was killing us on price. I think this is probably a much more cost-effective way of achieving very similar results. So I'm really glad that's coming back. You said you were teaching a class on writing press releases. Can I suggest that you consider expanding that to writing city council agenda descriptions? Over the few years, we've had some complaints when staff write a very nice technical description, but that agenda item description also serves as a communications tool for the public. And sometimes that gets too technical, and sometimes I'm not even sure quite what it's saying on some technical matters. So I think that's a good communication opportunity, our agenda descriptions, and I think we shouldn't overlook it.
So both agenda items and also public notices that go into the newspapers, a lot of that noticing, that can be something that was identified that maybe we could use some more training in general about how to do that. So I'll make sure that gets on the training list.
Great.
Yeah.
How much of this is, there's got to be room for not just kind of one-way communication, telling our story, but for two-way communication. Was your office, or were you involved at all, and how were you involved in the feedback platform online for the comprehensive plan? So I know we moved around from one platform to another, but the thing that was nice about the way that was done, and I don't know if it reached that many people in the public though, was an online platform for more kind of an online discussion where citizens could see other citizens' comments, and it gave the opportunity for a two-way conversation, not just a one-way conversation. So what was your role in that, and where do you see that in the future?
So that's our Engage Bellingham site, and that was at engage.cob.org for anybody who wants to pursue that and see what that content is. That's a social media platform, and that was another attempt to reach people in multiple different places. A lot of times people can't come to public meetings, so engaging online in their homes is one way to do that. So I was partnered with the planning department to get that going, and that was actually the first test for our social media policy when we put that in place as to does this meet all of the criteria that we want to use for social media, and it did. So we had that move forward, and right now that's a joint venture between, I mean, it's being funded by both by the planning department and the mayor's office, so we're sharing costs on that as well.
That's good. Like I said, one of the valuable parts of that is that's where we hear from the public,
That's
not
right.
just that we tell our story. One final thing?
Sure. Go ahead.
So we don't always do a perfect job of communicating, and this has to do with the bike infrastructure. We've got some great new green, not paint, it's a special surface in several intersections around town, and I'm still hearing a fair amount of confusion on what those are for. I just discovered these things, which look like great educational materials that we've produced, and I know we have a website or a page on a website about bikes. But so it seems like we went halfway towards an effective communications program on this new bike painting, but I don't think we went far enough, because there's still a lot of people who don't know how to use. I went online and had to look to figure out how exactly to use these bike infrastructure things. So I think it's an example where, as you say, there's always room for improvement, but that's a really recent example we could maybe look at and figure out, well, how could we reach people better? I mean, we did reach out. I don't know where these went, and people don't always find our website. I tried to link to it and point people to it, but that wasn't the universal reaction. So here's a really great example of where we tried to do something that didn't quite work yet. So why not? Why?
So I worked with Public Works on this education campaign, and there was a lot of concern that people were going to not know what these meant, and so and I am not fully updated on what the communication outreach is for that. This will be in the newsletter, so that'll be another way to reach out to people. I think there's been at least one, maybe two stories in the Herald about it. I know that we were talking about putting up signs on the WTA buses, both inside and out, to help with education. I'm sure I can get some more information about where that comes from. I think this is one of those challenges, though, when everyone sees it because it's all right there on the street, that there's going to be a lot of questions immediately as soon as it comes forward, and it's always a challenge to get the word out to everybody as to what this means, how to use it, and who pays for it, and all of that. So but we can get some more information to you about that if you like.
I don't necessarily need to know what we tried. It's, if you put this stuff out 2 months ago, people would ignore it. All of a sudden they see green paint and immediately it becomes relevant. So there's a challenge there. People won't pay attention to information until it suddenly seems relevant, but when it seems relevant, it seems like you're almost one step behind. I don't envy you your job, but it seems to me that this is a nice small example of much a larger problem with many things we do. How do we get people to pay attention at the right moment? Because, making a postcard, it doesn't get to them, or anything we do, it doesn't quite get to them.
And you're right, the timing is really difficult sometimes. We could be putting out public information for weeks or months, and then all of a sudden it's here and people say, we didn't hear about it. And
right.
So it's always a challenge, definitely. But I know for the postcards, I think that they are being distributed in various different places. I'm not sure where, though. I would have to get more information to update you on that.
Great, thanks, Vanessa.
Okay, Roxanne and Jack.
Just a quick thought that in the internal staff classes, I was wondering if it would be possible to add some training on working with the public, so more than just a policy, some really good training, because some of the feedback I get is about the lack of customer service that some people experience, so I'd love it if that could be improved.
Thank you.
Jack.
Vanessa, with the website work that's going on, will there be a new search engine?
New search engine? Yes, the search function is definitely a big part of the site, and where it's placed, I think I believe it is. I would have to get more information from IT as to the workings of that. But I know that that was definitely a high priority in the refresh, to make sure that the searchability of the site was improved.
Yeah, that was one of my most frustrating parts of using the site. And also, will there be a site map that will list out all of the different branches of the
I believe so, but I can get back to you for sure about that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? When's my power come back? No, I'm just kidding. My power is on. Thanks for coming. We will now go. Thank you, Vanessa. Mayor, yes.
Just one brief comment. I think many of you at one point in time have talked to me about communications between the city and the public and the city and making sure we got our story out. So I really appreciate the fact that Vanessa took on this survey first so we could get a little more concrete information from people about what they really wanted. And I also appreciate the fact that she's following up on this. And what she said, this is a two-way conversation between the administration and you. She's very serious about that. So if there's anything that comes up after the meeting or at any time, just shoot her an email so that she can either answer your question, respond to it, or pass it on to whoever does either have the answer or the ability to address it.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Our next item is City Council resolution regarding social media guidelines. Is this? Oh, Michael, go ahead.
Well, I don't know. We don't want Vanessa to leave just yet. This has to do with social media guidelines. Sorry, Vanessa. These were drafted to sort of parallel the administration and social media guidelines. They're a little bit smaller, a little less detailed. We kept it pretty simple. Basically, City Council is hereby authorized, both our office as well as individuals, to use social media, but to do so you have to follow open public meeting guidelines. The site has to be co-administered by a staff member so it can be archived and monitored for compliance. Of course, no electioneering or campaign materials can be used on it. It's pretty straightforward, but this brings us in line and gives anyone here and our office, that is Marie or whoever in our office, rules to follow if and when we do use social media.
Does anybody have any questions, or does anybody want to move approval of this resolution?
I would move approval of the resolution, City Council resolution regarding social media.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Michael. We will now go to the Waterfront District Waterfront District Status Report. Implementation status report, excuse me.
It is. We're focused on implementation today,
There you go.
so that's perfect. Tara Sundin with the Planning and Community Development Department. We have a short update for you today, focused on 3 issue. First, Amy Cram, the project manager for RG Haley, and her colleague Steve Woodward from Geoengineers. They're here to provide you an update on the RG Haley cleanup. And then Leslie Bryson's going to provide a little overview of the Breakwater Trail, formerly known as the ASB Trail. So we're excited to see that project actually complete, and we want to get the word out in the community about its completion. And then I'll wrap up at the end. I'd like to provide you a little bit of an update about some of the project coordination between the city and the port and Harcourt development focused on the downtown waterfront area. Amy.
Good afternoon. Amy Cram from the City Attorney's Office, although right now I'm here in my role as Environmental Project Manager for the RG Haley site. And I've had a lot of help from lots of different people around the city working to this point. And I'll be joined up here in a few moments by Steve Woodward, who's one of our lead consultants from Geoengineers that's been helping us on the, excuse me, on the project. Also, Craig Mueller from Public Works will be implementing this project when it comes to construction and has been vastly helpful as we've gone along in this process. So we're here today just to let you know that we've gotten to this milestone point of the remedial investigation and feasibility study. The RIFS is going out for public comment, and actually it started this morning, and it will run through October 14th. And this is a document that the city prepared with intense oversight from the Department of Ecology and a lot of help from a variety of consultants. And this document is exactly what it says. It's an investigation of the site to determine what contaminants are there, and then it presents an array of alternatives to clean it up. All of the alternatives that are contained in the document meet ecology's standards for cleanup, but they're evaluated in a variety of ways that Steve Woodward will discuss a little bit later. The comments that are going to be made on this from the public go to the Department of Ecology. So Ecology is the regulator here, and will be receiving all of the comments either online or by written comments or orally at a September 17th meeting that is being hosted in the fireplace room at the municipal courthouse. And I've included the Ecology website up here so that folks watching can access that. We have provided additional time from what's required by the Model Toxic Control Act, which is what the state cleanup law is. 4 weeks is what is required by law. We've provided an extra couple of weeks and an additional public meeting. Public meetings are not required, but we thought we would like to give an opportunity to anybody who would like to comment at the meeting itself. People can actually view the physical document also at our library or at the Bellingham Field Office for Ecology. I just wanted to give you a sense. I'm sure most of you know where the site is, but if you look down sort of at the bottom of the screen, slightly to the left, you can see two adjacent sites on the Cornwall Beach area, and that first one, which is in blue, is the Haley site. You can see that it's adjacent to the Cornwall Avenue landfill site, and it is relatively close to many other Bellingham Bay cleanup sites. This site is comprised of both an upland area, it's about 6 acres, and tidelands, and it was a former wood treatment facility. There are a number of contaminants that are listed in the slide here that are currently contaminating the site. And in 2009, the city purchased this site from Douglas Management, a part of Linden Transport, which held the site for several years and actually began working on the investigation, but did not do any actual work or contamination on the site. A couple of interim and independent actions were conducted at the site, the first one by Douglas Management, the second by the city in 2000 and in 2013 to contain some seepages of oil from getting into the bay. And as I've said, the city owns the adjacent Cornwall property. We bought part of it in 2005 and the rest of it in 2012. And because the site is adjacent to the Cornwall Avenue landfill, we've been working very intensely with the Cornwall Avenue landfill team as well as with the Cornwall Beach Park team, which also includes our natural resources division. This is the cover page from our master plan for the Cornwall Beach area, as you'll recall. And it's a 17-acre waterfront park that's planned, and the piece of the park that is currently the Haley site is in your upper left corner, and the rest of that would be the Cornwall landfill site. The process that one goes through to clean up a site can be done in a couple of different ways. This particular process is through Ecology's formal process under the Model Toxic Control Act, and I've laid out here the general milestones in that process. The legal agreement called the agreed order is usually the first step, and that is an order wherein the city agreed with Ecology to produce this document, the RIFS, which has now been produced and is out for public comment. And there are several times, as you can see, the green arrows show when public review and comment is to be had during this process. Also, we had public comment during the interim action in 2013. And so right now we're in the second green arrow phase, and the steps that will be coming up in the next 2 years are the cleanup action plan and consent decree, design and permitting, and then finally construction, followed by monitoring. And I'm going to introduce Steve Woodward to come and speak for the next few slides, and I'll be back at the end.
Just there. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Amy. We considered, we considered several different cleanup alternatives for the Haley site and evaluated the relative benefits and costs of those alternatives in the feasibility study. What you're looking at on the slide is one of the figures from the feasibility study, and it shows the relative costs of 6 different remedial alternatives that we evaluated for the upland. It's not important that you see too many details in this slide, but I do want to point out that on the low end of the range, the low end cost is estimated to be about $10 million for the upland cleanup, ranging to a high end cost of about $168 million. What drives the costs for the Haley cleanup, whether it be for the upland or for sediment, is the excessively high cost for off-site disposal. So that was a key factor playing into the selection of the preferred alternative for both the upland and the sediment portions of the site. When we evaluated the relative benefits versus the costs for the upland cleanup, what came out as the preferred alternative is identified in this slide as alternative U3A. It represents a combination of upland soil treatment and constructing an upland soil cap. And the estimated cost for that alternative is a little over $10 million. This is a similar slide from the feasibility study that shows the outcome of our evaluation of 6 different remedial alternatives for sediment. Those different alternatives range in cost on the low end from about $4 million to the high end of about $12 million. And what you're seeing with the progressive increasing costs in those different alternatives is a progressively increasing amount of sediment removal. The preferred alternative was identified as alternative S3. This includes a combination of near-shore sediment removal and managing that sediment in the upland beneath the upland cap, and progressive capping of contaminated sediment further from the shoreline. And I'll talk a little more about the details of the preferred alternative here in the next 2 slides. The estimated cost for the preferred sediment alternative is about $5.5 million. So if I can return briefly to the preferred upland cleanup alternative, U3A, the first step would be to remove the remnants of an old stormwater system and some underground equipment that remains at the site from the days when the R.G. Haley operation was active. The next step would be to perform soil treatment near the shoreline where contaminant concentrations are highest, and that treatment process is called solidification. And the purpose of solidification is to reduce the mobility of contaminants in soil at that location. The remainder of the Haley upland would be capped beneath a low permeability cap, and the purpose of the cap is to reduce stormwater infiltration and to reduce the risk of people or plants or wildlife contacting the underlying contaminated soil. To provide a little more a little more detail for the preferred sediment alternative S3, in this alternative, approximately 8,000 cubic yards of the most contaminated sediment that's located in the intertidal zone near the shoreline would be removed by excavation, and that sediment would be placed in the upland beneath the upland cap. That avoids the excessively high cost of removing the contaminated soil from the site for off-site disposal. In progressively deeper waters, there would be a conventional cap constructed on top of contaminated sediment, and then in deeper waters yet, enhanced natural recovery and monitored natural recovery. Those are processes that take advantage of the natural deposition that's occurring today of clean Nooksack sediment on top of contaminated sediment. For both the upland and the sediment portions of the site, the protectiveness of the remedy would be assured using institutional controls and by implementing monitoring and maintenance plans. Collectively, the upland and the sediment remedies would look approximately like this. Closest, just to point out the shoreline, is that dark line there. And closest to the shore, pardon me, closest to the shoreline, where the shading is the darker green, that's the area where soil stabilization would be implemented to reduce the leachability of contaminants. And the approximate boundaries of the upland soil cap is shown in lighter green. Closest to the shoreline is the location where sediment would be excavated and placed beneath the upland cap. This lighter brown area is the location where a cap of approximately 2 to 3 feet in thickness would be placed on top of existing contaminated soil. And then in progressively deeper water, this is in the subtidal zone. This is the location at this point in time speculated for the use of enhanced natural recovery. And there is a location of monitored natural recovery that would be further outboard of enhanced natural recovery. And those outer boundaries of monitored natural recovery have not yet been identified. Collectively, the costs for the combined upland and sediment remedies are about $16 million.
So, as Steve just let you know, the cost for the two pieces of the alternative, the sediment piece and the upland piece, are approximately $16 million. We've had past costs of $2.4 million. Ecology has reimbursed 50% of that through the Remedial Action Grant process. But we do have future costs associated with supplemental studies, cleanup action plan, the consent decree, design permitting, and finally construction. We have $1.3 million remaining in our Remedial Action Grant. We did not receive additional funds in this biennium. The entire state received $8 million for all cleanups, and we were not chosen as part of that $8 million. Luckily, we have enough money remaining in our Remedial Action Grant, which again only matches 50%, to get through the next few stages until construction, and probably some of this funding would also be good for construction. We will apply again in 2017 to, sorry, those numbers are backwards there, should be 2019, not that far away, 2109, for additional construction funds. And hopefully we will be receiving those, as at that point we will be a shovel-ready project and should be high in the queue for receiving funding. We do, however, have to find our city's 50% match from some other source, like bonds or loans. And here is an outline for the next couple of years. Right now we're in the top process listed there. We have the meeting on September 17th. Depending upon what sorts of comments Ecology receives from the public, they may or may not have to reissue the study and make changes in it. They plan to publish the final RIFS in December, move on to the next steps in 2016, and then 2017 or 18 construction. So I can take any questions or refer them to Steve.
Any questions for Amy or anybody? Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I'm just curious as to the capping component that was discussed and presented.
On down, Steve.
What I'm trying to understand is if those contaminated sediments can be, if they're mobile, or can they ever be mobile to leach out into the waterway there?
Are you referring to the upland cap or the sediment cap?
The slide where you had the brown off the shore there.
Right. So Just as a reminder, most of the contaminated sediment would be removed from this location, and so I think you're referring to this area where a cap would be constructed on top of the contaminated sediment. Those caps are designed to contain underlying contaminated sediment. In general, the rule of thumb is to design that for a 100-year period.
Okay, thank you.
Pinky.
So quick question, so that means that it is safe for children to play in the water when we're done?
Yes. This will be compatible with future use of the site as a city park.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. I think we have Leslie up next.
We'll be the first ones to go swimming in it anyway, so.
So one place on the waterfront where we currently have public access is our new Breakwater Trail, which I briefly mentioned in my earlier update. And if you haven't been out there, and I think most of you probably have, it's become a very popular trail, largely because of the tremendous views. And people in Bellingham just like any opportunity to be out near the water, viewing water. We've had beautiful sunsets this summer. The little pocket beach is a great place to go down and play. I've seen families down there. The trail starts by the Coast Guard station at Bellwether Way. You can follow the asphalt path wrapping around the I&J Waterway over to a small parking area on Hilton Avenue, continuing ramping up to the former Georgia Pacific Aeration Stabilization Breakwater with some steps going down to the little pocket beach. From this location on Bellwether, you can follow the sidewalk around the front side of the Coast Guard station and get on the trail, the port trail that goes all the way around Squalicum Harbor out to Swanage Point Park and back. So it becomes about a 3-mile loop, I think, to do that. So it's really been well received by the community, a great new addition to our waterfront, and we look forward to continuing adding more trails. So, any questions on that?
Any word on how far, on when will get permission to open up the rest of it?
It is open further than it was on July 7th, so you can go quite a ways further. Okay. And the mayor's working with the port on completing the trail.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Gene. That pocket beach that you refer to is a great place to play. Have we done an ecological assessment on there? Is that fragile habitats in any regard?
There is a potential to improve habitat there. We did work with, in our permitting, worked with Division of Wildlife there, and Renee should probably maybe talk about what is there. But I think there is maybe, well, I'm going to have Renee answer your question.
Okay. Well, during the waterfront planning process, not there, but in other beaches, there was this identified tension between allowing a great deal of public access and doing habitat restoration. And across the entirety of the waterfront, there are portions of beach that have less or more human access, less access when it's more habitat sensitive and more access when it's a degraded or artificial beach. So in this case, what is it?
And I will say we are putting up, yet to install some interpretive signs, which we'll talk a little bit about the environment, the biological environment, but I'm going to let Renee answer your question.
Hi, Renee LaCroix, Public Works. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly. You were just asking about any ecological significance of that particular beach.
Yes. What is the current habitat value of that particular portion? Is it, got some really nice sensitive species there? Is this a candidate for maybe, reducing the amount of access to parts of it to preserve the habitat value? There's a tension between habitat and public access.
So we did a couple assessments that point out that particular pocket beach does have a high ecological significance. We have forage fish spawning there, surf smelts, sand lance. It's also part of the connectivity that we need for juvenile Chinook coming out of the Nooksack that are trying to make their way along the marine nearshore. It's also significant for that. There's eelgrass out in front. So it is something that ranks fairly high from a habitat perspective, and it's something that we would like to raise awareness of. Whether or not that's going to limit public access remains to be seen. Most of the things I just rattled off, like the surf smelt spawning, the sand lance spawning, there's no studies that show that public access and forage fish spawning are at odds. And so it might be that we want to raise awareness about the eelgrass and not have people throwing sticks for their dogs in that area. It might be that we want to raise awareness in certain times of the year that there's juvenile salmonids moving through that area. I think it still remains to be seen, but it is something that we're interested in pursuing.
I just wanted to add that I brought a number of copies of the fact sheet that Ecology has published for the public comment period for the Haley RIFS, and they're on this table over here.
Okay, Tara.
Okay, quick update here. Harcourt Development, they were here, and I know a couple of you met with them in July. The city staff spent the better part of a full day with Harcourt and Port staff working over the details of our infrastructure. I think we've mentioned a few times that the city did not want to proceed with investing significantly in infrastructure, both in the roadways and the park system, without having the developer working with us. And we are glad that we didn't proceed, because the developer is interested in making some tweaks, which we had anticipated. So as you know, the sub-area plan is the policy document that is guiding us into the future. It is not the implementing document, however, and now we're in implementation, so we've got to work out kind of a finer grain of detail than we were able to do in master planning. So the master plan sets the framework, and now we're working through the details with Harcourt. In those details, you will see some refinement in the alignment of the roadways, and some refinement as well in the park system. We, I think, have had some very promising discussions with this developer. They really understand the urban development and what makes an urban area successful. And so they spend quite a bit of time and focus on their public areas. So it's a real pleasure for us to be working with this developer that values the public space and the public realm, just like our community does. We want to make sure we get this right. It's different than a Cornwall Park or a Whatcom Falls Park. We're talking about an urban area that needs to function well with a lot of people and commerce, and so we're working through those details now. And because of some agreements that we were able to make this last week, we are re-engaging our design team, and that's KPFF, working with Walker Macy from Portland. Walker Macy is the landscape consultant working on the park area. Leslie nailed the construction dates. I wasn't sure, but we are both the Granary and Whatcom Waterway Park are scheduled to probably begin construction in 2017. We would love to see it happen earlier, but we do have those cleanup projects. Whatcom Waterway is under construction right now, the cleanup, as you are all aware of. It's scheduled to be complete next year, mid to fall of 2016. And GP West, which is the property in the downtown waterfront area, is set to begin construction of the cleanup actions in 2016. And then we will come in after that. Harcourt Development, they have already begun designing and thinking about how they're going to use the granary building. So we are working with Harcourt on how, that interface there with Central Avenue, which will become a pedestrian corridor, how that's going to work as it wraps around to Whatcom Waterway Park. But then we're also working with them from the regulatory permitting side. So we've had a couple meetings with them about the Shoreline Master Program, about design review, and so they're getting started there. And then we will be coordinating our schedules. I don't have an actual schedule from Harcourt on the granary building yet, but we know that they are anxious to get that building and those uses delivered to our community as quickly as possible.
Questions, comments, Michael?
You said that we're working with Harcourt on a number of issues, including on the regulations. Some of those regulations are arbitrary. City Council approved them. We invented them out of whole cloth. Others, like the Shoreline Master Plan, are really kind of based on hard biological and geological facts. Within the shoreline, we need to behave differently. Are you talking about flexibility with the SMP or flexibility with the other kinds of regulations, like design review or street standards or things like that?
Yeah, flexibility predominantly with regard to exactly where the road's going, so not the regulations. However, I mean, we should never rule a change out to our regulations, as you point out. We are being pretty clear that we're not proposing changes to the Shoreline Master Program.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Renee. Thank you. Okay, we'll now go to our next item, which is approval of the August 10th committee meeting minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Been made and seconded. Any discussions, additions, corrections, deletions? All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries 7-0. Old or new business? Mr. Jack, Michael, Dan. Go ahead, in that order. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Uh-oh.
Yep, it's an uh-oh. You have to understand, Gene, that I'm dealing with 35 hours of not having power over the weekend in my entire neighborhood. So I have a little bit of an attitude today.
I don't blame you.
If you watch the,
You're not the only
planning
one.
committee.
There you go, kid. Okay, go ahead, sir.
So what I passed out was an article that came out a couple days ago, or a few days ago, in the New York Times about Uber. We made a decision a few months ago about what the background checks would be associated with Uber, and we decided that we were going to take the company's word for their ability to successfully screen and deal with background checks for their drivers. I had since provided the council with some emails of articles that have come out stating that Uber hasn't done that great of a job, and this one is probably the most damning about it. And I'd like to read some excerpts, if you would, to kind of underscore what my concerns are. So the New York Times article dated August 19th is titled, Uber Missed Criminal Records of Drivers, Prosecutors Assert. For more than a year, regulators in various cities have questioned whether Uber, the ride-hailing service, vets its drivers for criminal backgrounds as carefully as traditional taxi companies. Now the district attorneys of San Francisco and Los Angeles have offered perhaps the most concrete evidence to date that people convicted of murder, sex offenses, and various property crimes have driven for Uber, despite assurances from the company that it employs industry-leading screening. The district attorney said Wednesday that background checks used by Uber failed to uncover the criminal records of 25 drivers in the two cities. The charges were made in a civil suit originally filed in December that claims Uber has continually misled consumers about the methods it used to screen drivers. We are learning increasingly that a lot of information that Uber has been presenting the consumer has been false and misleading, said George Gasson, the district attorney of San Francisco. Gasson argues that Uber's background checks are not as thorough as another service called LiveScan that is typically used by taxi companies. 30,000 registered sex offenders in California did not appear in the public registry Uber uses in its background checks. The checks only go back 7 years. If someone was convicted of kidnapping 8 years ago, and they were just paroled last week, they just got out of prison, the Uber background check process will not identify the person as a convicted kidnapper, Gasson said. One driver was convicted of second-degree murder in Los Angeles in 1982 and spent 26 years in prison before paroled in 2008. He applied to be an Uber driver under a different name from those in his court records. The complaint said that Uber's background check process could not identify the driver because it does not use biometric identifiers like a fingerprint, because it cannot access criminal records that help to track aliases, and because the checks do not go back as far as the law allows. The live scan process would have identified the driver's criminal past. One driver was convicted of felony sexual exploitation of children in Wyoming in 2005, another of felony kidnapping for ransom with a firearm in 1994. Other drivers were convicted of charges like robbery, assault with a firearm, identity theft, and driving under the influence. Several were convicted of more minor charges like welfare fraud. Uber, which recently celebrated its 5th anniversary, is already valued at $50 billion. But government officials say that in pursuit of this breakneck growth, the company is cutting corners on background checks. The rest of the article people can read, but the basic issue that I'm having right now is that we made a bad decision a couple months ago. I would really, really appreciate the opportunity for the council to go and revisit this and reconsider where exactly we're going with the background checks for this company. I'm fully supportive of car share, ride share type services, such as what this company is doing. I'm really concerned about this company and about their practices. There's one thing about, their intent. It's another thing about the reality and what they're actually doing.
Let me ask Brian a question. Brian, when's this coming back? That might be the appropriate time to have a discussion. Go ahead.
Brent Henrich, Mayor's Office. We've scheduled, or at least are looking to the September 28th meeting to bring back the ordinance.
Okay. Roxanne.
In all complete fairness, I think Uber should be here to respond to these types of things.
And
I just want to read a very quick message that they have sent me about this because they somehow heard that this was going to be brought up. We have never had any of the critical events of any of this nature happen in the Pacific Northwest. Our background checks are more thorough than those currently used in Bellingham, and so our background checks would be an improvement. Also, the city would be able to spell out which databases are checked and what they are checked for in the code.
Okay, Michael.
Actually, Roxanne, thank you for saying that. I think that we have a problem with our current background checks. We know our current background checks the city runs aren't as complete. That was part of what came out in the discussion. It seems to me that we need to up our standards and define those standards, define what our standards should be, define what are acceptable means of conducting those background checks, then hold ourselves to that standard and or any other entity. So I don't know where you are on that, Brian, but I would focus on what the standards are that everyone should be held to, city and or other providers.
I think you're right. During this process, I think we've looked at our current ability to do those background checks, what that looks like, and what improvements we can make in our existing system, whether it's for a transportation network company, as identified, during this conversation, as well as for hire companies, as articulated by our code. So I think we are doing that look and making sure that we have the most complete process in place, whether it's for a hire company or a transportation network company.
Okay, so September 28th, we'll be discussing this. Thank you. Dan.
A less hotly charged item. I want to thank Chief Cook for allowing me to spend some time with crime scene investigator Joe Layton recently. Had really great ride along with Officer Layton. I also wanted to thank 911 Watcom Public Education Coordinator Michelle Thomas for walking me through the 911 system at the site here in Bellingham. So I just want to acknowledge those individuals. Thanks.
Okay. Michael, did you have some? Nope. Pinky.
Quick, I just wanted to wear both hats right now for a minute and just thank for everybody from Public Works, from the City of Bellingham, really helping out with storm duty this weekend and trying to make it safe for everybody out there. And just let you know that, apologies, we are still working. We have 176 sites right now that are down and about 10,000 customers that are still out of power, and we are doing our best. We have crews from the south, we have crews from BC that are helping us right now, so just thank you very much to the city for all the help that you've provided, and we are doing the best that we can, and the office is open if you need any help.
Anything else? Do you have anything, Mayor, or you want to wait till tonight? It's up to you.
Do we not have an executive?
Yeah, we do have an executive session. Yes, we do. Okay, here we go. We have 3 executive session items: litigation, Hollier versus City of Bellingham; litigation, City of Bellingham versus Sangti Yi. Getting better at that. And hopefully this will be the last time I have to say it. Potential litigation, approximately 10 minutes. We will be back at I'll be back approximately 3 o'clock. Meeting adjourned.